Hello, I'm Keanen McKinley, and I was invited by the Research with International Students Network to give a brief presentation on a paper that Chris and I published earlier this year. So this paper is available in the Journal of Studies in International Education if you want more information. In this presentation, I'm trying to give a brief overview of some of the major concepts and some of the main ideas that we're trying to present in this paper. So briefly, I'm just going to talk about missing data, internationalization, why this is important, and then kind of get into missing data theory. We'll spend a little bit of time here talking about the different mechanisms and methods to kind of really emphasize and illustrate the importance of understanding missing data and how we can approach it in our work. And then kind of get back to the article a bit to talk more about kind of the results from our review of the literature, and then just getting back to the overall significance and kind of steps that you can take in your own research. So missing data, if we were to formally define this, these are the unobserved values that would be meaningful for analysis if observed. So this is some information that we're really trying to understand and get at, but we weren't able to capture that data with our methods in our research. So this is an issue. Missing data is an issue that's inevitable in research, especially quantitative research, but it doesn't always get the attention that it kind of deserves. And that's what we're trying to really bring and highlight within this paper. Um, so there's different types of non-response that's out there, kind of different ways to think about missing data. But in this paper and this presentation, we'll be focusing on item non-response with an emphasis on survey research. So if we were to send out a survey and participants didn't respond to a question here or to, a question here or there, how would we go about approaching that? So it's especially important within internationalization research and researchers working with international students, because some of these populations, you know, being careful to use these terms, these individuals might be coming or be part of populations considered marginalized or vulnerable. And then such populations have higher rates of item non-response. And then kind of more specific to internationalization research, researchers have noticed or noted that we're often working with smaller sample sizes. So mishandling missing data can really reduce those sample sizes to smaller ones. So some of the problems caused by missing data, um, reduced statistical power, distorted parameter estimates, then getting incorrect confidence intervals, results with our significance test, and then really just getting compromised results and overall conclusions from our data. And then kind of more from an ethical perspective, we're excluding participant voices, individuals that may not be responding to survey items for particular reasons, and those voices aren't being, captured within our data and within our results. So the purpose of this study is kind of really just documenting first reporting practices. How do researchers acknowledge missing data in their articles, and how do they kind of outline that in their article? What are they doing to report missing data? And then Chris and I are also hoping to just, generally help improve the rigor of research within this area of research, by helping researchers kind of really understand missing data and then kind of outlining some steps that we can take. So I got several slides, as you can probably see at the bottom here. They've got 44, so I'm moving kind of quickly. But part of that, I really want to emphasize the broadness of missing data. This area of research is still, is very active, and there's a lot that's going. Researchers are still really investigating missing data and kind of the best approaches to handling missing data and getting the most from the available info that we have within our research. So I'm really trying to give a broad overview, and then, kind of point out some of the main issues, and hopefully kind of really make clear that this is a really important issue that should be addressed in articles and kind of among researchers in general. So getting into missing data theory, try and avoid getting into too many, the technical nuances of this. So a lot of the information will be a bit general, but it is important to recognize that there are going to be, exceptions to certain things, or there are nuances that you need to consider in your own analyses. So the first part is the missing data mechanisms, and this is going to be important because it's going to kind of inform the methods that we use to handle missing data. So understanding the missing data mechanisms and the underlying assumptions about why missing data is important. Um, these are describing the possible relationships between the measured variables that we've observed in our research and then the probability of missing data. So generally, there's kind of three different mechanisms that are out there: missing completely at random, or MCAR; missing at random, MAR; or missing not at random, MNAR. So MCAR is an assumption that's very difficult to defend because it's assuming the observed data are a random subsample. So, so the missing data, try to make the assumption that the missing data is just random by chance, which is typically not the case because there's going to be some kind of reason, underlying reason for why data might be missing. MAR is kind of like the goal that we work towards. So this suggests that data are conditionally missing at random once we've considered the observed variables. So kind of, very generally, we can kind of we're making the assumption that we can handle missing data because of the information and data that we've collected in our study. So we're able to use the observed data to kind of move ourselves towards this assumption. And then MNAR, this implies like the missing data mechanisms is dependent on unobserved data. So the relationship, the reason why data are missing is because we don't have certain data, which is very difficult to handle. It requires some additional assumptions and some more advanced techniques. So we're not going to really focus on MNAR in this presentation. We'll just focus mostly on MCAR and MAR. So MNAR is going to require help from like a statistician, or you're going to need a bit more theory. There's just a bit more work into it. So that's what we're focusing on, these two mechanisms. So keep in mind MCAR and MAR. There's kind of two general types of methods. The traditional methods often assume MCAR. So these are our deletion methods and then our single imputation methods. But again, we're looking to kind of move beyond traditional methods into more modern methods that assume MAR and allow us to kind of really make stronger assumptions to help us create or arrive at conclusions that are a bit more that are um, more defensible, like that we can actually defend. So the top ones, deletion and single imputation methods, are not recommended, just kind of very generally. And then modern methods are recommended. And again, there's a lot of research going on within within the missing data literature. So I'm presenting maximum likelihood estimation and multiple imputation, but there's been a lot of work recently on like Bayesian methods. So that's the kind of another area that's kind of opened up. But in this article, we're just focusing on these two. We'll focus on the traditional methods and why we don't want to use them, and then we're focusing on advocating for maximum likelihood and multiple imputation. So hopefully, we'll use some simulated data here, um, but hopefully we can convince you why we don't want to use the traditional methods. So the details of the scenario are provided in the article, but very briefly, we're looking at the relationship between satisfaction with campus experiences among students and kind of relationship with whether or not those students will recommend the institution to their peers. So just kind of refer to those as satisfaction and recommendation in the scenario. And this data, the details are in the full article, but what we try to do is base it on our findings in the literature review. So these numbers are kind of grounded in the internationalization literature that we looked at. So we've tried to make this, realistic. So this is the complete data set. There's a correlation of 0.4 between satisfaction, which is on the bottom here, and on recommendation on the y-axis. So that's the complete data set. So that's what we're looking at. Traditional methods. So there's the list-wise deletion, which is going to remove any cases with missing data. So if students are missing even one variable, that student will be completely removed from the data set. There's a related method, pairwise deletion. But kind of the point of this is that these two methods are really, in general, the worst that are available when it comes to research. So if we were to look at that visually, satisfaction, um, so recommendation scores are being removed based on satisfaction. And in this scenario, lower satisfaction scores, the probability of a recommendation score getting removed is higher. So that's why we see more values on the left removed between satisfaction and recommendation. So we can see just visually that our sample is quite altered. And the gray line, the gray dashed line is kind of like the true value in this scenario. And the black is the relationship within this analysis. So in this case, it's for the deletion method. So we do have a point here all the way to left here for satisfaction with a bit of leverage that's causing the line not to be too off. But you can just kind of visually see like what happens when we just start deleting data. Single imputation methods, this is where we're going to impute or generate a value for the missing data. So the first is like mean imputation, where recommendation scores are missing. So we're just taking the average values and imputing that. And we can see that the relationship gets attenuated and our slope um, gets closer to zero. Regression imputation is another approach. This is where you're kind of predicting the recommendation score, and you can see that the points end up perfectly on, like the regression line, which is not realistic. And then there's also stochastic regression imputation, which makes the data look a bit more realistic because we've got some noise in there that we've added to our regression model. But to paraphrase a quote that's cited more formally in the article, how certain can we be of one estimate for each of these points? So multiple imputation actually builds upon this concept and gets us more realistic results um, with the noise that we're able to get into. So moving quickly here, maximum likelihood estimation is one of the modern methods that we have. And this differs slightly from kind of complete case analysis, maximum likelihood. There's a bit of nuance to the approach. It's kind of hard to get into the technical details with it. And there's also, I can't really do a plot with it since it uses typically like a iterative algorithm to kind of create the parameter estimates. Multiple imputation is another modern approach. Spend a couple more slides on this one because it's a bit more, I think it's easier to kind of visualize. But what we're doing is we're taking the incomplete data set, we're making copies of it, and then we're imputing data within those different data sets. And then we're going to do our analysis of interest on each of those data sets, and then pool those data sets, the results from those data sets together to get our plausible values. So just looking at some code really briefly. So like lines 1 and 2 here, I'm looking at the intercept and sat, which is short for satisfaction. So I have parameter estimates for those coefficients. So I've got 1 and 2 is like one data set that's been imputed, 3 and 4 is another, and then 5 and 6 is another. And in this example, you can refer to the full article. It did 35 data sets, but here's just kind of a snippet of what we're looking at. And then we visualize that. We see like the gray squares and the red diamonds. Those represent different imputed data sets. So we can kind of see the noise and kind of the difference in our estimates between those data sets. But again, we'll pull those to get our estimates. There's different ways to really further those methods using auxiliary variables, and that's going to give us information about, we're going to be able to pull data from different variables. Between the two, it really comes down to a preference of maximum likelihood or multiple imputation. In the article, kind of, there's more details, but they're very similar when it comes to the results. So really what we're trying to show here with all this info is that it's really important to report missing data because there's a lot of work that should go into it. So in the article, this is our research question. Details are in the full article, but we looked at about 5 years of articles published in the Journal of Studies of International Education. And overall, what we found is that most studies are not reporting missing data explicitly, and the methods that are used cannot always be determined. So there's a lot of work that can be done in this area. Um, so some limitations will, you can read the full article for that. Um, I'll kind of just jump ahead to some of the general recommendations for what you might want to do. So the first is, expect missing data. It's inevitable, and it's not an indicator of poor research. So you just need to make sure that you're being mindful of it and how you're going to approach it. Some general guidelines when it comes to reporting missing data is reporting the completeness of it, reasons why the data may be missing, and then the statistical software and key settings that you used. And there are like templates out there available, the range from about 100 to 200 words that you can follow to report missing data. Here are some general guidelines about how you might conduct a missing data analysis. Um, Leveraging missing data, there are ways that you can use missing data to your advantage. There are planned missing data designs that incorporate missing data. But then also it's important to consider how you're going to prevent missing data, and that might be working more closely with the populations to understand why the data are missing in the first place. This is the QR code to the full article if you're interested in looking at it and want to look at the full references. And thank you for your time. Appreciate it.